Muse. I love writing, and I hope to publish a book one day. When people ask what I like to do for fun, I tell them I write. Sometimes they smile and say, "Oh, you're a writer," and that feels nice until they follow up with, "So, where can I buy your book?" I feel like I've misled them, like calling myself a writer gave the wrong impression. When I do call myself a writer, I get corrected that I aspire to be a writer because I don't have anything published. I recently joined writing communities and they call me a fellow writer. I love it, but instead of just accepting it, I feel the need to clarify that I haven't published anything yet. When I do, they continue to call me a writer. I want to think of myself as a writer, but can I really call myself that? Am I a writer, or am I just someone who's dreaming of becoming one? Yes, you are a writer. So much so that I can honestly end this episode right here because if you write, published or not, there is no doubt you are a writer. And this is a question almost every writer asks themselves at some point. For many of us, it's not a once in a lifetime question, it's a recurring one. And it always shows up when we're at our most vulnerable. So if this is a question that lives in your head, I want you to know you are not alone. So before we go any further, let's take a breath, unclench your jaw, shake it out, roll your shoulders back, and let's get right into it. Am I a writer? Why do we always feel the need to ask this question? Because somewhere along the way, the word writer stopped being a description and started becoming a label of success. In our society, being called a writer often feels like it requires credentials, a diploma, a credit, a publication, something official, something that earns you the right to put writer on a resume. So the word becomes restricted, conditional, and the question, "Am I a writer?" becomes a pressure point for one of your insecurities. That question is a worm. And it worms its way into your brain and it waits for the perfect moment, usually when you feel the most exposed. And that's when your inner critic, that little voice in your head, grabs the microphone and starts listing all the reasons why you are not a writer. You don't have anything published. Your work doesn't look good enough yet. You haven't written in a while. You'll never be as good as that writer. Or worse, someone validates that voice and questions your dream directly or indirectly and confirms in their eyes that you're not really a writer. Hence, then you confirmed yourself you're not a writer. And no matter how long you've written, if you've been writing for weeks or months or years, we withhold the title from ourselves until we reach a fabricated milestone. I'll be a writer when I get published. I make money out of it. I can write full time instead of as a hobby. Someone with authority, like a published writer, validates me. But notice what's happening here. The meaning of the but notice what's happening here. The meaning of the question, "Am I a writer?" changes. Not only do we hand over our passion to someone to judge, but we also do what writers do best and we give the words a double meaning. On the surface, on the surface, the question is simple. Am I a writer? Do you write? Yes, you are a writer. But the double meaning or the second meaning is a lot heavier. Am I a writer means, am I worthy to be called a writer? Am I worthy to be called writer? Am I worthy of being called a writer by other writers? Am I good enough to be classified as one? Am I good enough to belong in a community? Good enough to stand alongside the writers I admire, the ones who confidently call themselves writers? I'm having a really hard time with this. I want you I want you to sit with this question for a moment. How do you define a writer, and why don't you allow those same values to apply to yourself? Is it their output? The fact that they've finished a book, they've published a book, and that book is now sitting on your shelf and your friend's shelves and your cousin's shelves and whoever's shelves, bookshelves. Is it their discipline, the ability to show up, write, and carry a story all the way through publication? Is it their level of success, their external recognition, their validation? Or is it something else completely different? Is it their ability to create a story that pulls you into their world, the way that they've described a setting, whether it's beautifully or hauntingly or uniquely or just terrifying? Or is it the fact that they've described silence in three different ways without ever using the word silent? Is it the character development, how the plot and the internal struggle weave together seamlessly that you considered reading the book again for the third time this year? Now ask yourself this honestly. Would you apply the same rules you use to define a real writer to another aspiring writer? Or are you holding yourself to a standard that no one else is expected to meet? The question, am I a writer, often comes from the same place we've talked about in earlier episodes: pressure, guilt, a fear, all tangled together. How this doubt shows up will look differently for everyone. For some, it comes from emotional wound. For others, it's a combination of many different layers together. And here are some, not all, but here are some of the deeper roots behind that question. Could it be conditional identity? If you were taught that labels must justify through achievement, you must feel like you have to earn the right to call yourself a writer. Could it be the fear of being exposed? Calling yourself a writer can feel risky. What if someone challenges you? What if they've asked, "Oh, what have you published?" and you don't have an answer? Could it be the internalized dismissal? If writing was treated as just a hobby while you were growing up, that message tends to stick, even when you care deeply about it, even when you're making money from it. Could it be comparison? Seeing other writers online can make you feel like your progress is invisible or insignificant. Could it be perfectionism? If you don't feel good enough, you don't allow yourself to claim the title. For me, it's all of it and a little bit more. I was lucky to have people who believed in my dream. I truly was lucky. But I also had a handful of authority figures who set milestones for me to reach before I was allowed to call myself a writer. When I first dreamed of being a writer, I was 12, and I was told I wasn't a writer until I had something published. Writing was a hobby, not a career, unless I became a world famous author. And based on the work I was producing at the time, the chances of that was, really slim. I was 12. I was still learning. And instead of people seeing the story, they focused on the grammar mistakes. They didn't see the heart of my work. They didn't recognize that grammar improves with time, support, and editing. Lots of editing. And that those things are, they didn't realize that those things are learned skills, not proof of my worth as a writer. And it took 15 years for me to realize the truth behind that. At the time, I was just a kid, but I looked up to these authority figures and I listened to them. So I built this massive mountain in my head, a goal defined by people who didn't understand the simplest definition of what a writer is. And here's the ironic part: I did have a professional writer, a published author, tell me that those milestones were far too high for a young writer. Yes, she called me a writer. She told me I should have small, achievable goals instead. But did I listen to her? No. No, I didn't. Did I listen to the authority figures who agreed with the professional writer and that I should call myself a writer and pursue this life? No, absolutely not. Instead, I listened to the other people, the ones who didn't know what it took to become a writer, and who said that I wasn't a writer and I had to achieve all these goals to become one. And because of that, I hated it when people called me a writer because every time I called myself one, I was corrected. And when people asked about my stories, I'd say, "Oh, well, it's fantasy, and there's these vampires and witches and werewolves," and immediately I'd hear, "Oh, so it's like Twilight, or it's like the Vampire Diaries. Maybe you should try something original." They compared my stories to other works based solely on the creatures that were in it, without even listening to what the story actually was. So I started comparing myself to those published authors. I compared my messy drafts to their polished, finished, cleaned books. And of course, I didn't feel that I was good enough to be a writer. And by 17, I quit. The quiet truth underneath all of this. When you ask yourself, am I a writer? You're not questioning whether you love writing. Obviously, you love writing. You're questioning whether you're allowed to love it seriously. And when you tell yourself you're not a writer, what you're really saying is that your passion, your love of writing, isn't good enough. What the hell? Let's 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 dismantle that myth, because if you love writing, despite hating the chaos behind it, if you love writing, you are a writer. Being a writer is not a reward that you receive at the end of the journey. It's not the publication, it is not the word count, and you don't get the title revoked if you decide to take a break. Being a writer is about the journey you tell. Nope, it's being a writer. Nope, it is being no, it's a writer. It is being a writer is the journey. I can't talk. Being a writer is the journey you are on to tell the story that you're meant to tell. So if you ever question yourself, am I a writer? I want you to say loud and proud, I am a writer. Because a writer is someone who has a relationship with writing. That's it. Am I a writer? Well, do I write? Yes. It doesn't matter if you write stories or poems or lyrics. If you write, you are a writer. If you return to your draft even after long gaps, you're a writer. If you get annoyed at yourself because you wrote your with an R instead of apostrophe RE, congratulations, you are definitely a writer. You do not need permission to claim that title, and no one gets to decide it for you. When it comes to your villain, and when I mean villain, I mean that critical voice in your head that likes to speak negatively towards you. The goal isn't to silence it, it's always going to be there. The goal is to understand that villain. Once you've had your conversation with that voice and learn why it's being mean to you, why it thinks you don't deserve to be called a writer, here are a few things you can say to help ground yourself. I don't need proof to claim what I love. I love to write, therefore I am a writer. My identity isn't measured by productivity, it's defined by my passion and my relationship with writing. I am allowed to call myself a writer even while I'm learning. A writer continuously grows their craft. And if you enjoy journaling, and as a writer, I hope you do, here is your reflection question for the week. What achievement have I set as a requirement before I allow myself to claim the title of writer? Where did I learn it from? And why do I still believe it? You don't need to debate the answers. You don't need to place blame. Just notice it, write it down, and be honest with yourself. If you are asking, am I a writer? It's usually because writing matters to you. People who aren't writers don't usually ask that question. They don't wrestle with it. They don't grieve it when they're not writing. Some people do love to judge from the sidelines, but that's a different conversation. So if you need validation, here it is. You are a writer. Even on days you don't write, even when you're doubting yourself, even when you're struggling through that first draft, you are a writer. Being a writer isn't about proving anything. It's about being the no, that's not the word. It's being about being a writer isn't about providing anything. It's about being the interpreter, that's the word, interpreter for a story that's asking you to help bring it into the world. You're doing better than you think. And we'll take this one breath, one word, and one draft at a time. And hey, if you ever need a good vent about the writing process, you can catch me with my bestie Kayla over at Writing Sucks, but I love it. This was Dear Muse, and if you're struggling to write, put a comment down below with the hashtag Dear Muse, and maybe your question will be on the next episode. Or buy a new notebook.